Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthew Chute. I'm Chute Chi, and I'm also the Climate Buddha on Facebook. And right now, I'm talking to you on a video podcast so that I can explain our current situation with the climate. About a year ago, I said, and I'm in line in Facebook, that we are at a week-to-week basis. What that means is that the changes in the climate are being observed in a week-to-week basis. That the changes in weather and the changes in weather patterns and the reason for those changes are climate-based, because there's this jet stream that gets completely messed up as a result of the destruction of the Arctic's cooling power. So we're facing a very difficult situation where those of us who've been watching the climate closely and seeing cause and effect relationships that are directly related to the climate and seeing the degree to which they're occurring in relation to the metric that we have all been handed, which is the amount of degrees over industrial baseline. The industrial baseline starts before 1900 at some point, but the graph starts to go up at that point because gases were being put into the atmosphere at enough concentration at that point for the graph of concentration to go up. The graph of temperature also goes up, but it goes up in a different fashion. It goes up on a different mathematical scale. So as the CO2 went in linear fashion, it's now facing an exponential situation where it's going to also increase rapidly because it turns out there's something called a feedback loop. And if you heat the Arctic enough, you're going to release terrestrial methane. You're going to release underwater methane. And although there is some debate about that, and a recent paper says that most of that methane is being lost in the water column, that simply means it hasn't melted enough. And you better believe if the trillions of tons of methane that are in the Arctic seabeds decide to release, they're going to bubble to the surface. And when they do, you're going to have an exponential increase in CO2. So the thing is that these feedback loops, and the fact that we've been counting on the metric, which is this idea of a certain amount of degrees over industrial baseline, that somehow everything's okay once you understand that it's only 1.75 degrees Celsius, generally agreed upon over industrial baseline right now. Only 1.75 degrees over industrial baseline. So in the mind that most of us have for mathematics, we say, oh, that's just a small increase there, gee, it's 70 degrees out, it'll be 72 next year, Turns out that this is an average and a mathematical problem that I can't figure out, but I'll guarantee you we got smart enough people who can. They've used this metric as a way to make us understand that temperature increases are important to be tracked, but they didn't add the degree to which each individual degree and what that does to the living planet. It turns out that the planet of rock and water and the living planet on that rock and water are two separate things. The planet itself, if it goes to Venus, is still going to spin around the sun for billions of years. The living planet has a finite life. You can go extinct. It's possible. We have entire research departments and papers written by evolutionary biologists that talk about extinction. Why do species go extinct? What causes that? How do you prevent it for humanity? And it turns out that because of the changes that we made in the climate and the inability to understand what these metrics called average worldwide temperatures, understand them so that we can project out in the future and say, wait a minute, we've only gone up 1.75, then I guess we could go up to 5, 6, 7, 8. We really can't. It turns out that the damage that's going to occur to the weather, to the climate, it's going to disrupt growing cycles for everything. It's going to be too hot. It's going to be too wet. It's going to be just not right for anything to grow. Well, we'll have greenhouses and underground bunkers, etc. This idea that humanity is going to somehow survive this when the entire biosphere is going to be, especially the trees. Trees don't like it if you change the climate too much. They just don't like it. Trees also don't like fire. And the idea that when you dry things out and dry things out and dry things out, that it eventually catches fire, the idea that this catching of fire is some bad person with a match, is simply not the issue. The issue is not the ignition. It's the condition of the wood when it lights up. And our forests are going to get very, very dry. And that dryness is going to cause a lot of forest fires, and we're going to have smoke in the air. And it turns out this smoke in the air is another problem with the climate. So, smoke in the air from coal plants, by the way, has been saving us. It turns out that there may be a degree or more of warming in something called the aerosol masking effect. Coal specifically, but generally our pollution. As it gets up into the atmosphere, it reflects the right kind of sun, and it actually cools the planet down. So if you hear any information about geoengineering, Harvard is involved in a geoengineering program right now. Harvard is also funded by Exxon and has a complete relationship to the oil industry and is essentially functioning as an extension of the oil industry on this project. And they are doing geoengineering. They're giving it their best shot at trying to increase the aerosols in the air to cool the globe down, to stave off the immediate problems of abrupt climate change. I haven't heard any evidence of what's going on with it, but the basic theory of throwing aerosols into the atmosphere at enough of a density to affect the temperature of the planet, the math is there. It can be done. Just the possibility of sustaining the fleets of jets and rockets and all that stuff in the face of 120-degree days and in the face of complete destabilizations of the populations and this migratory thing that's going to occur everywhere. And all you have to do is to find a little research and realize there's all these different migratory populations that are leaving places that there's nowhere to, they're in drought, they're not growing anything. Middle East is under tremendous stress for growing. Syria, tremendous stress. Yemen was in a tremendous drought when we decided to, prevent them from being refugees. So the thing is that the idea that we have to have a policy towards refugees is the essential essence of the universal alignments. This isn't about men's games anymore. This isn't about, this just isn't about who has the biggest pile of whatever you're collecting. This isn't about that anymore. Although collecting stuff to your very end is a great idea. It's a good idea. Lots of fun to do. But the idea that this somehow then gives the ability to create policy. The idea that we're electing some policy is complete fiction in the United States. We are not getting any connection between our votes and policies that our votes are supposed to support. We're lucky if a policy we're interested in becomes the way things are operating. This has to change. There is simply no way we can be faced with worldwide climatological crisis where essentially everywhere will be in the state where FEMA will be needed. Once we're at that state, the level of organization necessary to keep humanity alive and the will to live against the odds that we're facing are going to be difficult for all of us to face. There will be no air conditioning at some point wherever you are. Don't know when that could be. Don't know. Really depends on what kind of tragedies are hitting in your area. We know that the entire grid in Florida can pretty much go down after one storm. In the face of huge climatic change, big problems, extra storms coming through. What if big storm went through here and shut down all the electricity in the Gulf Coast and then shut down all electricity in Louisiana and then in Texas? What are we going to do with our resources? Who gets their electricity back? Just a question, theoretical. Possible. Might happen in 10 years. But the kind of heat that's being created by accelerated and abrupt climate change as a result of the poles melting, the poles are the air conditioner. It's all big, shiny, white, beautiful pile of ice and snow, reflects the sun back out, gets cold is all that cold air refrigerates the rest of the globe. Everything was great. Just about all the ice is gone. Wait, that is not true.